Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the 3.19 Path of Exile Manifesto. We'll talk about how the community feels as well as give you guys my thoughts on it because you guys did ask for it as well. So let's go and start off with the meme over here. So starting right off, you can see it says 3.19 announce, open the gate. People are excited. 3.19 Manifesto release, close the gate. And then over here it says Bex announcing buffs to 100 plus uniques, open the gate a little. So that's really what I'm excited about. Let's go ahead and kind of just start off with what is being said with a lot of the players, as well as how people kind of feel about this. So basically what it comes down to is there's a lot of nerfs to the defenses that recently got posted over on the Manifesto. So someone's like, GGG, what exactly do you want players to do? So basically I'll sum up this entire post over here, but it pretty much says that we're nerfing defenses and damage to the players, and the top 1% aren't actually affected by this, which is definitely true. Like people that have mage build, people that have multiple, exalts per piece of gear, it doesn't really affect them that much. What's the difference between, like, let's say 100,000 armor versus like, okay, now they only have 80,000, right? The numbers aren't going to really affect those players that much. It's only going to be the new players that just jump into the game for the first time. They're going to be absolutely lost. They're going to get destroyed by not only the monsters, but because the game doesn't offer enough damage, because now with the mana reservation changes, players are just going to basically lose out potentially on like 1-2 auras depending on what you're actually doing. So this is an overall nerf, and people are kind of upset about this. And someone put up a relatively good point over here where someone was like basically saying something about like dying is kind of the problem in the game, and the thing is that the Church of Flicker accepts you, my child, as in people are just going to invest so much into the damage category that they just completely don't go for defenses at all. And that is an actual viable way to play Path of Exile, which is a weird thing to say because on certain boss mechanics where you'd have to like get around and actually dodge things, if you just do enough damage, you kill the boss before anything happens, you're good to go, right? So a lot of people are just saying embrace the glass cannon builds. Look at this guy dying 2,000 plus times. That's insane. But for the most part, it's overall people kind of saying that we're just going to have to suffer for this most recent update. But this is the thing that I'm personally most excited about. So if you guys are wondering, like, what are your thoughts on this change, I think there always needs to be a give and a take. If we're taking away defenses, give us some new things to play around with, and they didn't really offer that to us. There are some buffs, and I'll talk about that. They didn't announce the 100 uniques, like what ones have the buff yet, but if you guys do want to see it, I plan to cover this as long as they are relevant. But if they change some like numerical values by like 1%, it's not going to change things, right? If they buff Red Beak for like a small amount of damage, it doesn't realistically matter. But there's so many uniques in the game that were like legendary, like Kaoms, that like realistically at the higher end no one's playing now because of the Eldritch currency modifiers. So many things have just been outdated, so this is a really great change, and as long as they can make these buffs actually good, I'm okay with these nerfs, because if there's other things to play around with, that would be good. But I think that they should actually announce these both at the same time. Give us all of the nerfs, but then give us all of the buffs, not just like, okay, here's all the nerfs, we get upset, then there's the buffs, and then we get excited, right? I still think that they should be released simultaneously, but perhaps it's actually, this is an interesting like point right here, is to get people to talk about Path of Exile, to complain, to mention things, so it just gets more people talking about it. Fortnite also was a big fan of doing this. They would do something really strange, and then people would talk about it, and then they'd like revert the changes, or like when they would just close the game for several days, people were really upset. But like the thing is that it's a marketing technique to get people to talk about things, right? If they basically didn't really change too many things, whether it's a buff or a nerf, even if they just buffed a bunch of things, people would still get excited, I think. And perhaps it's just kind of like their tactic of making the game have a bunch of announcements that people maybe aren't super excited about. Let's say like in 3.15, where they basically nerfed so much damage and so many different things, and then slowly over time they started buffing different things. So maybe that's just a marketing technique. It's weird, but that's just how things can go. So again, a lot of people were saying the same thing. I'm just gonna like mention that a lot of people basically are coming to the conclusion of they're nerfing a bunch of stuff for the casual players. And I've always mentioned that Path of Exile should not be essentially nerfing a lot of the defenses, especially. Like, I can understand maybe some of the things that are performing like overly crazy. Like there's some builds where basically you go in and you die, and you basically just kill the boss, and you just go in and die. And that's just the way that some builds work, and I can understand them not wanting the game to be, okay, this streamer's playing some really crazy builds, like the top tier build, and all he's doing, he's just dying, right? And I could understand some, things getting nerfed in that sense, but for the most part, defenses in the game, I feel like should not really be touched too much in terms of nerfs. If they're gonna buff it, that's great, because as a content creator, I create like build guides and stuff, and people mention that the game's already way too hard, and on top of a lot of these nerfs, it's going to make it much more discouraging for newer players. So this was kind of a great joke over here because Necromancer is actually taking some nerfs, and I still think that the build is definitely going to be playable. You guys are seeing it here in the background. This is some Necromancer gameplay of the Skeleton Mages. Very, very good build. I mean, you cut this damage in half and it's still like a very, very strong build. But they're saying like next league, no one's going to want to play Necromancer. Everyone's going Saboteur. But some more memes over here. They're saying that we want players to invest more into the defenses. And this is like a joke because, like, you know, they don't have very much in-game currency to actually invest into these. And the thing is that I absolutely agree. Like, the top tier players won't be affected by this. They can still get like, you know, max spell suppression. They can still get insane amounts of like armor. It doesn't really matter and it doesn't really affect them. But for the like casual people, maybe the people that only can spend a couple hours a day, you know, coming home from work and or whatever, you just don't have that much time to invest into the game. And that, at the end of the day, that's kind of the problem, because if they look at this game and they only are nerfing and changing things for like the 1% of players, it seems very strange. I've always felt like the game should be balanced around where everyone can at least do most of the content. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be able to do every single thing. Like, a lot of people never even make it to Maven. The completion rate for, I believe, Maven and Cyrus, I think like 2 leagues ago, was at 0.1%. Like, most people never get to these endgame bosses that they've designed. And why create content for, you know, so many players that like 99% of people, they just never get to experience? I mean, while that is kind of cool because they can search it up and look up build guides and stuff, that's where I get a little bit like kind of like, I think you should make it more accessible, right? But let's go ahead and go over these changes. So starting right off with a nice little buff for melee builds, fortification is going to be a little bit buffed over here. So basically what it comes down to, the entry for the passive is now like 30%, previously 20%. So extra damage reduction is always good. It lasts an extra second. Great. I'm not going to go over every single like note here. I just kind of want to highlight, you know, the things that I think are the most important things coming to this most recent change on the balance manifesto. So I think the fortification change, that's great. Okay, so what else are they nerfing, right? So the Necromancer is actually getting changed with the unnatural strength ascendancy. So this is actually going to be a nerf to the Necromancer. So what it comes down to is the Necromancer doesn't have unnatural strength anymore. That's the +2 to minions. Now, a lot of people were super upset about this, but like, just read a little bit further into the notes over here. Okay, so helmets can now no longer roll +1 to 3 level of socketed minion gems. Instead, they roll with 1 to 2 level of all minion skill gems. So basically, they just moved it over, right? And I think that this is a great change. Overall, it's kind of a buff in a sense, because now I got extra points for my ascendancy. So the thing is that, you know, with this change, I would say that it's overall like a neutral. In fact, it might be a buff because some people don't need the +1 to 2 level of all minion skills, because or the +1 to 3. A lot of people just need the extra like Spectre, which are technically getting nerfs with the like the buffs and the charges that they're going to be giving to the other minions, because it's going to scale differently now. So there's a lot more changes to those minions. Did take nerfs in other ways. Absolution actually got changed over here, and also they mentioned the summon skeletons is actually changed as well. We'll have to wait and see how bad it actually is. So it's approximately 25% less damage at 20. So big damage cut over there. But the thing is that honestly, Necromancer is so powerful that like you can take away like 50%. I'd still say it would be very, very powerful. And I would say relatively beginner friendly. And that is not even counting if we get any extra buffs to the 100 uniques, which is the thing I'm most excited about personally. So I would say, again, maybe they're just doing this to like make everyone talk about it, and then they're going to get upset, whatever, post on forums and stuff. Again, getting people to talk about the game, and then they're going to make those changes. So minions across the board, there's I guess a buff technically with summon Raging Spirit. I won't get into like the nitty gritty of every single build, because otherwise this video will be half an hour long, and I want to, you know, not have a super long video, at least for this one. So also Defiance Banner is actually getting a huge nerf. We're actually running it in the gameplay. I'm also running like Grace. I'm running a Determination. Like I was surprised that we didn't get a hit with Determination. I feel like that thing in particular, or like any of the shields that would give you plus life % on block, like that mechanic is something that I'm so glad they didn't touch. I think we got away with pretty easy for any build that plays that can play like a shield. Having that life recovery on block is just so insanely powerful. So anyways, going into Defiance Banner, it's basically cut in half. But again, talking about the top tier builds, it's not going to really matter. I think the reservation amount of Defiance Banner is actually like way too low anyways. But with these changes, okay, sure. Okay, I can accept that. It was too good, but maybe it could say like at certain intervals. I think this would be a great change too. Like once you reach, let's say, play like maybe like 40, 50,000 armor, the number gets like a lot lower, if that makes any sense. That would be a good way to make it so it doesn't really hurt the you know, entry level players, but the higher end it nerfs it a little bit if that really was the problem. Because again, like the beginner players, they're just gonna get absolutely destroyed if they're like playing melee, they're in Defiance Banner. Yeah, it's still rough. Like honestly, melee, I've basically signed out of playing melee unless of course they're getting a huge buff. And just this fortification, I think it needs to be a little bit different, but we'll have to wait and see what other skill gems come out if they are announcing skill gems. They're also nerfing spell suppression as well. So spell suppression rolled on gear, it's being nerfed about like 20 to 30% depending on what piece of gear that you're looking at. But they're going to actually, this one, there is a give and a take. So they're giving more value to spell suppression over on the tree. So that can be overall a nicer change depending on how you look at it. But I mean, you could just get a bunch of pieces of gear. Then you don't even need a revolve around the tree at all. So that will be different for certain builds. But that basically is going to be a nerf, I would say, overall. Reservation efficiency, this is the thing that I care about because Ash of the Star is not a cheap unique. It used to be super cheap, and if it stayed the same price at like I don't know, it was like under an Exalt at one point, but now it's just so expensive. That and then like crystallized omniscience, which both actually took a nerf. So reservation efficiency, I believe on Ashes it was cut by 10%, and then on top of that the reservation mastery is actually being changed. So one of them, that 15%, just completely removed. I mean, if they're removing something, give us something else instead. I've always said that. Maybe enlighten, change drop rate, or like they'll make a like I don't know. Make certain jewels or like gems like cracked versions of it, so it's like a worse version of it, but it has a higher drop rate because Enlighten's not the most cheapest thing to actually come by. So I think that this would be a really great idea in addition to like these changes. Just give us other things to play around with. If you remove something, give us something else to invest into. That's again kind of what I've been saying. Crystallized omniscience actually took a nerf. It's like it's going to require about 50% more of like the stat to actually get that effect. So instead of it being like what is it, per 10 of whatever, you get the extra penetration. So that's going to be an overall nerf to the item. The item's still like really good, but at the end of the day, that should be, I hate when they nerf like some of the top tier items that are super sought after, because it makes it not feel as powerful. I guess, you know, for some people maybe that's a good idea. I just have never understood nerfing like the best in slot like item when they are super hard to come by, and like most people really never get to see things like Mage Blood, right? Like if you think about like the player that just hopped on to try to play at Path of Exile, do you think realistically he's going to get a Mage Blood or a Crystallized Omniscience or Ash of the Star unless they really invest an insane amount of time into it and let that player feel rewarded when they get that item, when they get that headhunter, or whatever the case may be, right? I think that that's the way I personally see it. But this was a post over on Twitter that I thought was really good. So this person, Vlinia, over here, said that, so this manifesto has been very interesting. An interesting read. And the defense changes, oof. However, are you not going to address the arch nemesis mobs that are universally disliked? And they actually responded to her, and it says, this balance manifesto only covers character balance. Other game balance details will be covered in announcement and patch notes. So at least we're getting maybe potentially something with this, just the announcement of perhaps nerfs to the arch nemesis modifiers. That would be great because, again, if we're nerfing all the defenses, how about we nerf the monsters, you know, attacks, or maybe their defenses as well? It'd be just, again, something to have a give and take with. I think overall, people don't get excited about, oh man, something's getting, you know, nerfed, my favorite build's getting nerfed. I don't get excited about wanting to play a game with that. But if there is some new items, new uniques, like show these new things to get us excited about. Like, yes, we're getting a bunch of nerfs to defenses, but maybe these new uniques will basically counteract it. Maybe the new uniques will be way better anyways. Because with the last update, or where was it, when we got the Eldritch currency, I think that was, like, was that an Arch Nemesis, I think was when we got that? When we get these Eldritch currencies, that makes a huge difference to the game, and that's a huge buff in so many different departments, to the point where, like, yeah, we can take a little bit of nerfs, and then we get some buffs. It's a give and a take, and I think that we really needed to see that, and I keep on mentioning this, but again, I don't think people get excited about nerfs wanting to play a game. Let's say maybe someone played Path of Exile, was way too hard, they're like, okay, maybe I'll try this league. Oh, there's a bunch of nerfs, never mind. But if they're like, oh, they buffed this, that makes it exciting for, you know, content creators to maybe make some new builds with it as well. But I'm curious to know, how do you guys feel about this? Do you guys like this update, or do you think it was a bad update so far? For me, overall, I would say in terms of announcement, again, it could be a marketing technique where they just want us to talk about the game, and then they're going to give us all of the buffs. I think it should be simultaneously released. Like, they're going to say, what would be really good is them to release some buffs, some nerfs, and call it part 1 and be like, stay tuned guys, part 2 is going to be coming out. Follow us over on Twitter or, you know, different, you know, social media to see the next update, right? And that would get people like, oh man, I can't wait for next week. I want to see what else is getting changed, right? Versus just releasing all of the nerfs once and then, I guess, kind of, in a sense, buffs later. Because again, these unique changes, I hope it's not a nerf, because as long as they don't change Fleshcrafter, I might just play Skelly Necros at next league just for the league mechanic, unless we get a new skill. Like, I really want some new skills to play around with. That's my personal take on it. But anyways, let me know your thoughts down below. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. And if you want to see more stuff in the future with Path of Exile, other action RPGs, as well as other gaming content, this is your first time here, subscribe to the bell, and I'll catch you guys in the next video and let me know your thoughts. Peace!